To speak to the legislation, the chair recognizes Representative Howrylak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It certainly is an interesting time here in the Michigan House of Representatives, and apparently, this is my bill. Emphasis on the word apparently. I look at this and I'm amused and I'm bemused. I'm amused because I didn't know anything about this until I got wind of it on Tuesday, and nobody had asked me to be part of the process. It's interesting to have your bill get hijacked over in the Senate and become something that you didn't intend it to become. Obviously, the provisions in this bill as it was introduced remain, and I am thankful for that. The folks who are wrongfully incarcerated in the state of Michigan and receive compensation, their compensation should not be taxed, nor should their compensation count against a homestead property tax credit. It's the reason why it passed almost unanimously in the House 7 months ago. But over in the Senate, it became something new. And as we know, the school aid fund, the portion of the Michigan income tax that goes to the school aid fund under this bill will be reduced. And I know that there's a construct, a theory that if some additional sales tax revenue is coming in because of the constitutional distribution of sales tax funds, that it'll be okay. That is what we call fuzzy math, and it's something that I certainly, as a CPA, wouldn't sign my name to because there's a certain amount of uncertainty to it. As Donald Rumsfeld used to say, there are unknown unknowns in this bill, and there are probably known unknowns in this bill, and I can assure you that there will be a lot of unintended consequences in this bill, and I find it interesting because it's probably going to be undone by the next governor, at least the funding part of it. And so this is a very messy way of solving a problem. Most of us in this chamber would say, we're not against trying to clean up polluted sites, and goodness knows I don't know anybody in this place who would dare say that we don't need to spend more money on fixing the roads. We all know that these things need to happen. And so I say that I lament over this bill, and I think to myself, what has happened to my bill? But I can't get too upset about it, I suppose. Maybe I can, I don't know. Can you get too upset about something at 1 in the morning? But, well, if we're going to be very specific, 1:28 in the morning. I think that there are better ways of doing this, and this is a good example of why we shouldn't be doing major legislation on the fly like this. I can assure you that there are better ways of doing this, and ways that would be a little more bipartisan in nature and more longer lasting. So let me also bring up something that probably won't be mentioned elsewhere. If there's additional tax revenue in this state and we seek to find out how to use it, I am deeply concerned about the future of the national economy, and Michigan will not be immune to it. If we do anything with additional money, and again, there's a perception that there's additional money, it should, A, go where it's supposed to go, but if you don't know where to put it in the rainy day fund and or pay down debt. We know that MIPSers has a lot of debt. There are costs that haven't been paid for yet, and we know that we have to pay for it eventually. So it would make sense that if you're going to do this, put it to something that has at least something to do with schools. And the pensions of teachers and school employees that is underfunded seems to be the sensible way of doing it if you're going to go down that route, which I wouldn't recommend doing it. So I speak and I lament about what has happened to my bill. And I don't think we should vote for it. I really don't. I think we should vote against this bill. I think we should find a different way to accomplish the same thing. And I think that we shouldn't change the allocation of tax money going into the school aid fund. It's unfair, and it's improper, and it certainly shouldn't be done. So I would encourage everybody in this chamber. Oh, one other thing, lest I forget, that there's a perception of an improvement in this bill. So the amendment, by the way, and I can speak to it because it's now part of the bill, the amendment that was adopted, what it did was it created a perceived hold harmless, and the hold harmless was based on a per pupil funding. And so there was no inflation adjuster in there. And instead of actually having the provisions that were inserted in the Senate into this bill sunsetted, they actually sunset the hold harmless, which kind of defeats the purpose of putting it in there in the first place. And it kind of is an affront to my logic and our sense is it's the 4-year sunset should have been on the provisions that were added in the Senate. The hold harmless thing was closed, but we need to have an inflation adjuster, and it shouldn't be based on per pupil funding. It should be based on total allocated money. So anyway, I did not want to forget to say that because I think it's important, because I think when people see a bill, they see an amendment, they say, oh, this looks like it improves it, when in fact it really doesn't. I think people need to know that. And so this bill still has problems. I've seen worse bills, so don't get me wrong there. That's why I'm not beating my chest or anything. But I certainly lament about what has happened to this, and I know I used that word about 4 times, so I just want you to get the flavor of how I feel. But please vote no on this bill and find a better, more constructive way of solving this problem. Thank you.